Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be asking the question, on what day did Jesus die? Um, there's three possibilities that have been suggested, and evidence is given for each one. Notice I've listed them: Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. Those that take a Wednesday date for the crucifixion, they take Matthew chapter 12, verse 40. This is the verse that refers to as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish. So will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And it mandates that this has to be full 24-hour periods. And then it says, well, Jesus rose on Saturday night, and then he was arisen by Sunday morning. Notice everybody agrees, the empty tomb was there on Sunday morning. Um, Likewise, Thursday, it takes the same passage. So both of these views, both the Wednesday view and the Thursday view, are really going to be based on one verse, Matthew 12:40, and 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And it says at least a portion of a day and a portion of a night have to be in view in each case. The Friday view, and this is the view that's been traditional throughout most of Christianity in most places. The scriptures are fairly clear in stating that Jesus was raised on the third day, 1 Corinthians 15:4, Acts 10:40. And it's also understood that the Jewish people commonly spoke, even both in Hebrew writings, but also in the Old Testament. You can find examples of the same thing, where they spoke of 3 days and 3 nights as any portion thereof. Now, like I said, the Wednesday and the Thursday view hinge upon a literal reading of a single verse. And remember, that single verse is using the analogy, it's using the type of Jonah. So I'm not quite sure how literal you want to be. And if you were trying to be too literal, you'd say, well, gee, he's in the heart of the earth. Did that mean he went down to the center of the earth? Or was it, is this just figurative language for being in the grave, which I think it is? Um, both these views reinterpret any mention of the Sabbath day. We're going to see some references to he was taken down before Sabbath began. They take that as a reference to the Passover. That is, they claim that the Passover was described, instead of being called the Passover, it was being described as the Sabbath. The Friday view, it finds the support, I think, really of the rest of the New Testament, aside from Matthew 12:40, and just points out that Jesus was taken down from the cross just prior to the Sabbath. Matthew 27, verses 62 and 63 point that out. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 4 speak about how Jesus was buried and he was raised the third day according to the scriptures. Likewise, Acts 10:40, God raised him up on the third day and granted that he should become visible. So this was the regular saying among the church, that he was raised on the third day. Luke chapter 24, verse 21. This is the two disciples who meet Jesus on the Emmaus Road. So it's later on in that Sunday. And they're explaining to Jesus, we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, it is the third day since all these things happened. So they're on the third day. The day before that would have been the second day. The day before that is the day when it took place. Matthew 27, verses 63 and 64. We've cited this already, but it's well to read it. Sir, we remember that when he was still alive, that deceiver, these are the Jewish authorities speaking to Pontius Pilate. They're referring to Jesus as the deceiver. After 3 days, I'm going to rise again. Therefore, give orders for the grave to be made secure until the third day. You say, wait a second, is it after 3 days or until the third day? Were they only watching it? No, they understood what they were saying. They understood the way they reckon time. And so it was to be made secure until the third day, lest the disciples come and steal him away and say to the people, he's risen from the dead, and the last deception be worse than the first. By the way, it's interesting to note how they guarded against the disciples stealing the body, and then later on wanted to sort of have it both ways, then wanted to accuse the disciples of having stolen the body, even though they had guards to stop that from happening. Let's look at an example of the way days are described. This is from Acts chapter 10, where Cornelius sees a vision. That's in Acts chapter 10, verses 1 through 3. And then the next day, Peter sees his vision. Remember, he's in his upper room in Joppa, and then he goes downstairs and meets the servants of Cornelius. And then the next day, the day after that, the next day, he sets out with them to go meet Cornelius, to travel to Cornelius's home in Caesarea. And then on the following day, they arrive. We'll count how many days we're talking. And I notice I put 0, 1, 2, 3. And as Cornelius relates a series of events, he says that it was 4 days ago at this very hour. You say, wait a second, that was just 3 days on the next day, the next day. He says it was 4 days ago at this very hour that this took place. And that can only mean that he counted the day on which the event took place as the first day. And then the day after that was the second day, and so on. Now, here's a reference to the Sabbath, Luke chapter 23, beginning verse 54. And it was the preparation day, and the Sabbath was about to begin. Doesn't say Passover was about to begin. Doesn't say something else. It's speaking of the Sabbath. Verse 55, now the women who had come with him out of Galilee followed after and saw the tomb and how his body was laid. And they returned and prepared spices and perfumes. And now notice that they weren't preparing a Passover meal. They were preparing these things. And on the Sabbath day, they rested according to the commandment. So this gives every indication of just being what they call the Sabbath day. Luke 24, verse 1, but on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb bringing the spices that they had prepared. So they prepare the spices, they rest on the Sabbath, and then the next day they come to the tomb. Now notice when it refers to the first day of the week, that word week, ton, Sabbaton, in other words, that's the term normally used to describe a week, and it works here as well. The Jews, therefore, this is John's account, the Jews, therefore, because it was the day of preparation, so that the body should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day, asked that Pilate that their legs might be broken, that they might be taken away. Now you say, wait a minute, was this the Sabbath or was this the Passover? And my answer is yes, it was both. It was Sabbath and the Passover. Notice that Sabbath was a high day, and so you had the Passover that had fallen on the Sabbath. Now, here are the various days of the week where the 14th of Nisan. Nisan is the first month of the Jewish year. You say, wait a second, I thought that the first month of the Jewish year, we always say Rosh Hashanah is in the fall. Well, no, not in the Bible. That's a secular practice that's sort of been adopted by the Jews only after they came back from Babylon. But all throughout the Old Testament, whether in Exodus or in Esther, you can look it up. The first month is always in the spring, Nisan, and the first the day of the week of the 14th of Nisan takes place on different days of the week. And so here's just a listing of when that would take place each year. 28 AD, it was on a Tuesday. 29 AD, it would be on a Monday. 30 AD would be on a Friday. I think that's a possible candidate. 31, 32, those don't work. 33 AD, also on a Friday. 34 on a Wednesday, I think that's way too early. So if I'm asking on what year did Jesus die, I think there's one of two possibilities. I think it's either 30 AD or 33 AD. It's interesting to note, and I put it here on the chart, that it just so happens, and this isn't really evidence, it's just an interesting little additional factor. It just so happens there was a partial lunar eclipse on that Friday, leading up to leading up to the Passover. And you say, why is that significant? Here's why it's significant. Remember how it was prophesied, and then later Peter says, and it was fulfilled. This prophecy in Joel chapter 2 that says the sun will be darkened. Well, sure enough, we read about the sun being darkened when Jesus was on the cross. But then the next line in Joel's prophecy was that, and the moon will turn to blood. Now, the New Testament in the gospel account says nothing about anything happening to the moon. Acts chapter 2, Peter quotes Joel chapter 2 and says this happened, and he quotes that part of the prophecy, but he doesn't expand on anything about the moon. Is it possible? Because if you've ever seen a lunar eclipse, it's not like the moon disappears. Instead, it takes on a reddish hue. Can I say it this way? It turns, figuratively speaking, it turns to blood. Could that have been what took place in the year 33 AD? Possibly, if that's when it took place. I think that's an interesting addition just to be noted. Not evidence, but just something interesting of which we can take note. The important thing is not the day on which Jesus died. The important thing is that he did die and he rose again from the dead. And that means you can trust in him as your Lord and as your Savior.